Hello, and welcome to our February 2024 Governed Stage Roadmap Review. Just to set the context here, within the Governed Stage, we are focused on governance and compliance across all of GitLab. We have our Authentication and Authorization team focusing on how users log into GitLab and what resources they have access to after they log in. I'm serving as an acting PM for the anti-abuse team. Grant is working on the compliance team, which helps provide compliance visibility, as well as the security policies team, which provides compliance enforcement. And then we have Alana working on threat insights, which includes vulnerability and dependency management. We also have included in our charter our software supply chain security working group, which helps provide for features across the GitLab product. Just to start off, before we get into the roadmap, I want to highlight a few things that we've recently released over the last 3 months specifically. So one of these is that we now have the ability to require two-factor authentication for GitLab administrators. This new setting provides an extra layer of security, especially making sure that that's enforced for these highly privileged users. Also, in the last 3 months, we added some new capabilities to our security policies, including the ability to require approval for all merge requests under the conditions that you define. This includes the ability to require approval for merge requests from an author or from a user who is not the author or has not committed to that merge request. It also allows security and compliance teams to enforce that code goes through a merge request rather than being force pushed to the default branch. With this change, we've also made a rename to name these policies merge request approval policies, since they're more encompassing of all of the different types of approvals that can be required. Lastly, I want to highlight that we've released as an experiment support for enforced CI compliance jobs. This includes the ability to scope your policies based off of the compliance framework label that you've defined, as well as the ability to run a custom block of CI YAML. So that being said, I want to shift into our roadmap. And as part of this, just please note that any information presented here is for informational purposes and should not be relied on for purchasing or planning, and it is subject to change. So across our 12-month roadmap, we have a lot planned, including some key themes of improving scalability. This includes scalability with our audit logs, scalability with our vulnerability and dependency list, and also scalability in the user experience, things like adding filtering, grouping, and tracking for multiple branches. We're also working to improve our authentication and authorization, including up-leveling our capabilities for enterprise users and adding better support for custom roles, including new permissions, the ability to roll those out across multiple individuals at scale through bulk editing, and also to sync with LDAP. And then lastly, we're working to improve our visibility into compliance through enhancements to our compliance standards adherence report, as well as enforcement through ongoing improvements to our security policy enforcement. So with that being said, let's focus a little bit more on just the next 3 months that we have planned in our roadmap. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah to talk about the plans for our authentication team.
Hello, my name is Hannah Suter. I'm the product manager for the authentication group here at GitLab. Just wanted to remind you of our mission as a team. I like to think of it as that we provide a toolbox for administrators and group owners of GitLab to be able to decide for themselves how they want to balance security and accessibility for their users. So we play a lot into the security narrative, but we try not to forget too that we need to make GitLab easily accessible for our users as well. Our highest priority we're working on right now, and we're getting this ready for our initial preview here next month, is our Google Cloud integration. If you haven't heard of this, it's a collaboration between GitLab and Google Cloud. It includes not only my team, but a few others from GitLab. And what we're doing, think of it as a tight integration between the two, whereas a platform engineer may no longer need to interact with GitLab and then go into Google Cloud and do something. We're hoping to make it native within GitLab that you can do some things with Google Cloud. Integrated runners, artifact management, and some deployment related tools are kind of what's in scope. And my team has been in charge of the authentication piece, or kind of setting up that pipeline where we can authenticate users. If they have a Google Cloud account, they can automatically authenticate into GitLab without having to create a separate account, and they're linked. And then also kind of all of the authentication required to exchange some of that data I talked about. We're continuing with deliverables for our enterprise user management. We have automated claims done now, which means that if a customer verifies their domain, any users that join GitLab with that domain will be automatically claimed as enterprise users. We're planning on some security controls around this feature, such as group owners being able to say, if a user doesn't have my verified domain, they're not allowed in. So that's a control. And then another control is that currently on GitLab.com, it's a bit difficult to prevent people from using their username and password. Just with the way SSO is set up, it's not always enforced around every group a user may be a part of. So we're adding a control where if someone is an enterprise user, you can disable them from using username and password authentication, and instead using the preferred authentication mechanism that you control. And this prevents users from having kind of an extra set of credentials out there that's usable. So it improves security by kind of getting rid of a possible attack vector. We're adding just one feature to our token controls this quarter. And currently we have the ability to disable personal access tokens on self-managed GitLab. We're looking to bring that same control to SaaS. Some customers aren't comfortable with the different capabilities that personal access tokens can have. This will give the ability for you to turn off token use. And this again will be sort of predicated on the enterprise user concept. So you'll really want to encourage GitLab.com customers to verify their domains. We're also working on service accounts. We put these into place last year. These are automation accounts. They're not tied to a human user. They don't take up a seat. And probably the most compelling reason for them is that they're also can be exempted if the administrator or group owner chooses to be exempted from expiration dates, which we do enforce on group and project and personal access tokens. And that expiration, if they didn't have one, is coming up in May. Today, this is very much API only. We're working to build some elements into the UI, allow you to customize your name. Currently today, we give it an auto-generated name. We're going to add a badge that identifies it in the UI as a service account. We don't currently have a way to delete, so we'll be adding that. And then depending on the email address you put in for your service account, if your service account is running something that's important for you to get notifications about, like a failed pipeline, for example, we are adding email notification support so that a human can actually access something that may go wrong as a result of using a service account. And I believe that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Joe.
Thanks, Hannah. Hey, everyone. I'm Joe Randazzo, PM for Authorization. For those who don't know, Authorization is a relatively new group that covers GitLab permissions, which is comprised of both default roles and custom roles. One of the biggest challenges we hear from customers in the space is that maintainer and owner roles are overprivileged, especially those in regulated environments, and request ways to reduce the privileges. So we're working on segmenting these areas into their own permissions, and a few of them to note is CI/CD variables, compliance framework, security policy, and a few other settings. These are being prioritized so organizations can reduce the number of owners and maintainers in their environments. The team is also focused on simplifying custom roles at the self-managed environment. So by allowing admins to manage the custom roles at the instance level, rather than on a per group basis. And then today you can create a role, but you can't edit the permissions. So the team is expanding on allowing customers to edit the permissions. So you can either add or remove permissions in the future as needed. And And there's also efforts on auditing custom roles and assignments to those roles to users for compliance purposes. That's it for authorization. Over to you, Grant.
Thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. I'm Grant Hickman. I'm acting PM for compliance, and I'm also product manager for our security policies group. So I'll be taking you through highlights for both of our groups, starting with compliance. The first highlight I wanted to share today is around displaying linked security policies in the Compliance Center. So I'll talk about this here a bit more in the security policy section, but as we're adding this ability to scope policies to a compliance framework, we're also going to surface that in the Compliance Center view under our framework settings. So you'll be able to gain visibility into the policies or the controls that you're enforcing from a compliance standpoint as they relate to a particular compliance framework. So this will allow you to drill down and really get a sense of which controls are being enabled and enforced per framework. Next, I wanted to talk about our standards adherence reporting. This is an area that we're definitely investing and expanding over the coming milestones and quarters. We're going to start first with what we're calling the SOC 2 starting 7 criteria. And in the next 3 months, we're going to focus on 2 of these criteria that we want to add in terms of adherence checks. So the first one is code safeguards. This is a way to ensure that we're building and deploying from a protected branch and that we're automating deployment to our production environments. So ensuring that code is safely deployed, there's no opportunity for maliciously modifying what actually ends up in production. And then the second check is called VendorSec, and this is focused on ensuring that dependency scanning is properly enabled for projects that are in scope of this particular compliance. We are going to be continuing to expand in this area. We're starting here with the SOC 2 starting 7, but we'll be expanding. So for those in the field, definitely interested in hearing from you what standards are critical for your customers and specifically what checks they'd like to see here as we continue to build. Moving on to the next and last one for compliance I wanted to highlight today is the audit events ClickHouse migration. While this is a bit of a back-end effort, it does have real implications on the on how customers use our product, and it is customer impacting. So first and foremost, it's going to help us to really improve performance in terms of managing audit events in GitLab, and it's going to open the door for building more audit events, having more granular audit events, supporting more complex querying against those audit events, full text search, and immutable event data. So this is something that's going to be really huge for expanding in the audit events that we maintain within GitLab. Let's move on to the security policies section. And the first highlight for security policies is the pipeline execution policy action. So Sam did reference this earlier. This is one of the components allowing you to kind of enforce CI more globally. This is something that today is an experiment. That's because we are iterating. We're listening very closely to how our customers are using compliance pipelines today. We're addressing many of those use cases and expanding to support a number of limitations that we've had in compliance pipelines through the pipeline execution policy action. The next few things that we're working on right now in this space are the ability to inject what we're considering reserve stages in your project CI configuration from what's enforced within your kind of global CI configuration through the pipeline execution action. So these will be stages that only support the jobs that are being created in the pipeline execution action and preventing circumvention by those operating in the projects downstream. Another capability that we're working on is an index pattern for enforcing these jobs. So you'll see if a job is enforced from a pipeline execution action or security policy, this -0 at the end of the job. If that job name exists, we'll be incrementing it to -1. This is essentially a way to ensure that these jobs always run, and it is also a good indicator of when these jobs are being enforced in a project pipeline. The second kind of component of this overall story of enforcing CI execution is policy scoping. This applies also to merge request approval policies in addition to scan execution policies, and it allows you to scope a policy to a compliance framework or to a set list of projects. This allows you to granularly manage policies globally from your top level group or subgroup. And it is currently in an experimental state. We're working on moving this into GA in 16.10 as we add support to add a scope if you're managing the policies at a project level, when you do have multiple groups, subgroups, or projects linked up to that security policy project. So once we complete that, we'll be moving it into GA. Next, we have surfacing policy violation details. We have some common challenges from customers around using merge request approval policies, where approvals may be required when they're not expected. And ultimately, there are so many different ways that pipelines might be configured, different branching strategies our customers may use. This will help us to really narrow down what exactly is causing the MR to be blocked, gives transparency to customers and developers who are using policies, and will help them to kind of unblock the policy and identify what exactly is causing the violation, and also drill down in particular for particular security findings that might be causing the block, so they can really prioritize and focus on those. And then the last one I wanted to highlight for security policies is the ability to toggle policies to fail open or fail closed. So this will give you a little bit more flexibility per policy in determining how severe you want to enforce your compliance, or what the level of compliance enforcement should be. So in this case, for example, you could fail open for a particular policy and ignore cases where scanners are not running today. If we don't have an artifact report to do our comparison, we block and fail closed, but you'll be able to actually per policy toggle that to fail open, and provide a little bit more flexibility when you're trying to enforce at scale, which has been a common challenge for our customers. So yeah, I'll wrap up there and hand it on over to Alana with Threat Insights.
Hi, thank you, Grant. I'm Alana. I'm the PM for Threat Insights. And first, I wanted to go over, let's go on to the next slide. Yep, some of the things that we have coming for the dependency list. So we are going to be adding filters for component, packager, license, project. Project will be at the group level. And license and project are actually already available today. So gonna go back in and add component and packager, and then also the ability to group by license, packager, and then again project. So users can more easily triage what vulnerabilities they need to and understand their components on the dependency list. We are going to go back in and add vulnerability data, similar to what we have today on the project, to the group and subgroup level pages. Then on the vulnerability report, we are going to have the filtered search component. So it'll be a component that will allow us to have more space. And then users will be able to, like they are today, filter by status, severity, tool, activity, project at the group level. And then the one that I have shown in this screen is being able to filter by identifier. This is an ask that we get a lot, and we are looking forward to making it available in the product. Today, users will be able to group by status, severity, and OWASP top 10 at the project level, and we are going to be adding that ability to the group level in the coming milestones. And lastly, on our roadmap, we have the ability to auto-resolve or auto-dismiss vulnerabilities. We'll be creating a new type of policy called a vulnerability management policy, and this will allow users to create a vulnerability that is no longer detected to resolved, or they will have the option to auto-dismiss a vulnerability based on their designated criteria. This improvement will help teams save a lot of time and more efficiently triage when they are looking at all of their different vulnerabilities. Sam, back to you.
All right, thanks everyone. I just wanted to highlight a couple things we're working on in our software supply chain security working group as well. One is we're working to add a new job source claim to the ID token that's generated. And this starts to get a little bit technical, but in your CI pipelines, you can use ID tokens to generate a token that can be used to sign artifacts. And right now that token has no way to distinguish which job it came from. So by adding in this additional job source claim, we can identify which tokens were generated for jobs specifically that came from scan execution policies or the new pipeline execution policies. And by doing that, that lets you cryptographically verify that the build artifacts that you've signed with that token came from that particular job that you've defined, so that you know that a later job defined outside of a policy, like by a developer, hasn't come in and tampered with that job artifact. There are lots of use cases for this. One use case is to help you verify that the security scan results that you've produced through a scan execution policy have not been tampered with. And so you can actually verify and make sure that nobody has changed that after it was produced. You also could verify if you wanted to run your build jobs in a pipeline enforcement policy, you could verify, sign the output from that and verify that it came from that trusted build job itself, rather than being tampered with somewhere later downstream in the pipeline. We've talked about this a little bit in previous reviews, but we are continuing to work towards our end state vision of being able to sign artifacts automatically inside of the GitLab runner, so that users don't have to set that up on their own, so that that signing just happens by default anytime they produce artifacts. That's a longer term vision, but we are continuing to work towards that over the next 3 months. All that being said, we appreciate you joining us today and participating in learning about our governed stage roadmap. I'm really excited about the things that we've got coming out here in the next 3 months, and I'm looking forward to any questions that you may have.